The country's getting bankrupt through these mainstream parties. The federal debt is over $1 trillion market debt and growing. Debt service payments to the banks are $32 billion a year. NCA saying Canadians first. We have to rein back all the money flowing out. A lot of it's flowing out to the UN, foreign aid, other countries. We got to help our people first. We support elimination of federal taxation for anyone living in poverty. We also have a beautiful plan on CPP where we propose to increase it by 3 times the benefits. Canadians have been getting ripped off on CPP. They pay in it all their life and they get a fraction of what they should be getting. And they can only pass on 60% to their surviving spouse. And then just a quarter of that to their surviving kids. This is wrong. We would allow 100% pass on to the surviving spouse, to the kids. This is your money. You're getting ripped off. We will deal with it. It's not the place of government to be creating jobs. It's the place of the private sector. Government has to get out of the way. It's highly bureaucratic. The federal government is bloated beyond means. Harper grew to the highest level in historic history. I think it's 289,000 federal employees. Now it's approaching that. We want to get government out of the way of that and allow the private sector to take over if Northern Pulp grows, which is actually a foreign company owned by Indonesian billionaires. That's what needs to be done. We got to create a process to allow the private sector to flourish. This is through lower taxation. This is through cutting unnecessary regulation. Allow the private sector to take off entrepreneurs. That's what we support. We don't believe in the government interfering. Thank you.
Will you support the removal of motion M103 when you are elected? Our democracy and freedom is at stake for the introduction of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your question. Mr. Armstrong.
Well, thank you for your question. Thank you for your question, BJ. That motion was put forward in the midst of our last federal leadership election for the Conservative Party in Canada. It was done solely with the purpose of trying to disrupt that leadership campaign. It was a torta partisan thing that the Liberals put through to try to really mess up some of our leadership candidates and try to brand them as being extremists and not supportive of other religions. There's lots of protections already in the criminal justice code for protection of religion against hate crimes. To single one religion is probably not something that legislation should say. This isn't legislation, it's only a motion, it's non-binding. If it came back to the floor of the House of Commons, it would have to be reworded because basically if it ever became legislation, it would be unconstitutional. And really, we have to value all religions equally, not single one religion out above another. Thank you.
Mr. Duchesne.
Something new and different often makes people afraid, and I think that's where this is coming from. And it makes me think of Bill 21 in Quebec, where people are not allowed to wear religious symbols of any kind if they work in a government job. And I think that's totally unfair to many different branches of immigrants. And I think that, let's welcome them and make them, and that's not making people feel welcome. And that means that Jagmeet Singh couldn't be a teacher in Quebec. And that would be sad. You know, I've seen on TV the images and stories of people who would be excellent teachers, but they can't teach there and they have to go to British Columbia or someplace else. I think we need to really address that situation.
Mr. Archer.
The People's Party of Canada actually has a policy. We're staunch defenders of freedom of speech. And not only would we repeal motion M103, but we'd also repeal Bill C-16, which basically compels speech. So, I mean, that's pretty much the easiest way to answer it. Yes, we'll take them away. They shouldn't be there. There are other laws in place to protect people practicing religion. And there's things such as slander and libel laws as well, that if you say something that you offend somebody or do something wrong, you will be held accountable. When it comes to free speech, you are free to say what you want. You're not free from the repercussions of what you say. Thank you.
Mr. Rushton.
Thanks, Mr. Tan, for the question. I, like most people up here, don't know much about motion 103. However, I agree with Bill that it needs to be repealed. And as your MP, I would fight for that. Thank you.
Mr. Garvey.
I protested N103. NCA will rescind that. It's just a motion. If it becomes legislation, then it's a real threat. Islamophobia was created by the Muslim Brotherhood in the 1990s to silence criticism of Islam. I recently had a dialogue with an imam from the US. This is purely about survival. They don't want people criticizing Islam. Unlike my conservative friend here, he doesn't understand Islam. It's more than a religion. It's a political ideology, way of life. It has values and principles that are 100% inconsistent with our liberties and civil rights. Therefore, NCA supports a ban on political Islam, the practice of it in Canada.
Absolutely not. Canada is a very young country, just over 150 years old. We're one of the most successful nations on this planet. Look at all we've achieved since Confederation in 1867. Just take a look. Why would we want to fix something that ain't broke? Our political system supports the regions across the country. It balances both the legislative branch and the judicial branch. We have a great system, a parliamentary democracy. Trying some sort of proportional representation and changing our political system would throw us back. It would create all kinds of minority parliaments. It would give power to fringe groups and fringe parties, some of which you see on stage here tonight. I'd hate to see some of these fringe parties having the balance of power in a Canadian parliament. We need to make sure we protect the first past the post system because it has done a good job for Canada so far. Thank you.
Mr. Garvey.
NCA supports proportional representation 100%. It's way more democratic than the first past the post. And I disagree with my conservative friend. This country is becoming bankrupt. Our federal debt's over $1 trillion market. The conservatives have added $458.9 billion to the federal debt since 1968. They're bankrupting the country with the liberals. We need change. Proportional representation will give you more say at the ballot box. Your vote will have more meaning, more value, and that's something we support.
There's something about what we're doing that has pushed them aside. They don't want to be part of it. And if anybody can answer that as a question, fine, but that's my takeaway from tonight, right? So I'm not asking you to answer that one, but I just want to leave a thought with all of us.
Thank you, Mike. But I do want the question to be put to the candidates because it is a crisis situation. We have a situation where young people have just avoided the vote. And they now represent a majority, in fact, in our country of voting capacity. So Mr. Armstrong would answer first and all others follow. What do we do to get youth engaged in the public process?
Well, one of the first things is if you're elected as a member of parliament, a member of the legislative assembly, or a municipal councillor, I think it's very important that you actually get out into the schools and make yourselves available and talk to students about the political system and why it's important to them, their families, and their communities. And while I was elected, I attended as a teacher. I was very comfortable in schools. I attended schools almost every break week I was home. I would speak to classes at both the elementary and secondary level. That's one thing we can do. The second thing is we need a civics class in our secondary system. The provincial government has got to put one in so they understand how the system works. In the United States of America, like them or hate them, in grade 10, they do American government. They understand their system. They understand the three-branch system they have. They are very well informed about how their own political system works. We need more civics in our social studies curriculum in our high schools in Nova Scotia and across the country.
Mr. Duchesne.
What we see here, we've seen it all the meetings we've been at, and this is the 7th meeting we've had. And the young people are simply not engaged enough in politics. But if you go to a climate strike, something involved with climate change, young people show up at those. So we need to engage them with the kind of issues that they're really concerned about. And they are really concerned about the survival of our planet. Maybe they didn't think that we were. But we also need to get into the schools more often too. And I know I'm going into Spring Hill Elementary School on Friday morning to talk to the kids, and I welcome that as an excellent opportunity, and I hope the other candidates will do it too. Yeah, they're not going to vote, but their parents vote, and it's a good age to get them engaged.
Mr. Archer.
Well, it's not just the youth that aren't voting and turning out solely. It's 30% of eligible voters in the last election didn't bother to vote, and it's part of the reason I'm sitting up here tonight. You look at the other parties, and they're all different shades of the same thing. Like, most people feel that voting for any one of the other parties will make no difference, so why bother voting? So that's where the People's Party comes in, where we have new ideas, and we want to get people excited and empower the people that they actually feel that they can make a difference and make a change. And that's why I got involved here and why I'm sitting here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Excellent question. The PPC candidate is delusional if he thinks NC is the same as the mainstream parties. Remember the Conservative candidate? Oh, sunny. Everything's sunny and great in Canada since Confederation. What a load of baloney. And here are the facts. Students are mired in debt, approaching almost $28 billion across the country.
Excuse me, Mr. Garvey. The question is, how do we engage youth in the process? Well, we don't need the history, we want them to go forward.
I'm dealing with the facts. Can I answer?
If you'll answer the question, please.
There's over 1 million migrants coming in. This is the truth. Go fact check it afterwards.
Pardon me, Mr. Garvey. We're asking, what would you do to engage youth in the political process?
Can I answer?
If you'll answer that question, yes.
Yeah. This is related.
We have a question about immigration coming up
No,
momentarily.
but this is related. I'm answering it.
Go ahead.
This is all connected, everyone. This is why they're getting displaced from jobs. The future is bleak. We need to reduce the immigration back so they have opportunities. And they will get involved in the political process when they see hope in our society.
Mr. Blanche.
Okay, this is a miraculous moment. The last thing that Mr. Garvey said is the first thing that I'm going to say. We need to give youth hope, okay? But the hope that we need to give them is that they're going to have a planet they can live on safely. We got to give them hope that when they vote, their vote will be counted and will actually elect someone. They're not going to go out and vote because they want to vote for the Green Party, or even maybe the NDP. And they know that if they do, they're still going to get Scott or Lenore. That's the problem. That's the problem why they don't vote. They need hope. It's sad and it's true. So we changed the electoral system. We let them vote from a younger age. And yes, Larry, I am going tomorrow to CEC to talk with students there. Thanks very much. I'm ahead of it. I'm ahead of the orange.
Mr. O'Lennis.
How do we get the youth in? Oh, okay. I agree with Scott and the PC that we do need to have civics class. And for me, I'm a brand new candidate running for a new party. So basically, students don't know that where I exist. I'm running for a party that's called Veterans Coalition Party. We need to get into the schools, get the youth involved, explain the system to them, give them their civics classes, hold mock votes. I don't think the age should be dropped to 16. It should stay where it's at until they prove that they're mental age to actually vote and understand the issues. Thank you.
Future coming up. I would just like to know from the candidates what they can do to put my mind at ease that I can live with my property without worrying about the government coming to confiscate it. And also for me, but if they start here, where does it stop? Maybe the government will not like certain other things that we own. And then the first thing, we have nothing. We don't have a democratic country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our first speaker will be Mr. Duchesne.
Well, I think we certainly need tighter regulations on anything like assault weapons and maybe handguns too. I'm not sure what my party's saying about that, but too many guns in too many places cause too many killings and too much trouble. So while I say that, I also recognize that a lot of people still live on wild game, and we need to allow people to do that. It's good. It's sometimes good for the game populations, and it's really healthy food. So yeah, more controls than we have now.
Mr. Archer.
Actually, the People's Party of Canada does have a policy when it comes to firearms, and I myself own some rifles and like going hunting, and I have a possession and acquisition license. For what Mr. Duchesne's talking about, a handgun or some special semi-automatic weapon, you need a restricted possession and acquisition license. What most people don't realize when the Liberals brought in more restrictions is that because I have a PAL license and somebody may have a restricted license, our names are run through the databases every 24 hours. We are the most heavily vetted and most law-abiding citizens in Canada, firearm owners, and we don't need more regulations and more laws to further restrict what you choose to own and how you choose to do it safely and effectively. What we do need is tougher penalties on criminals that actually commit crimes or... Okay. But we need tougher crimes and tougher penalties for criminals anyways. Thank you.
Mr. Rushman.
I would never support taking guns out of the hand of law-abiding citizens. However, I think we do need to make sure that everybody goes through a background check and it's safe when you're given a gun. Our biggest problem is guns coming across the border into this country and being used for criminal activity, not the guns that are here being wrongfully used by the law-abiding citizens that own them. So, Dave, I would do anything I could to block the Liberals coming in and taking your guns.
Mr. Garvey.
Thank you, Dave Larson. Excellent question. I'm a hunter. Regardless of whether I was a hunter or not, it doesn't matter. NCA supports the right to self-defense of you and your family. We would include that into the Firearms Act. We also support a constitutional addition, the right to self-defense of you and your family. We believe that should be a constitutional right.
Mr. Blanche.
Thank you very much. This question of gun control comes up quite a lot, and I think it's an example of something that is used by the political parties to try and tear us apart. We obviously have the potential to have a real gun problem in Canada. We have more and more gun violence in our cities. We also have a rural population that's been very responsible using their guns for a very long time. We had an attempt at a gun registry that was really very poorly managed and was used as a political football. I don't think that the fears, Dave, that you've raised are completely real. I don't think anyone will come and take your guns. I wouldn't support someone coming to take your long gun and make it so that you couldn't go deer hunting. I definitely support the need to make sure that children aren't being shot in our cities as well. Thank you very much.
And I want to make it very clear that the Liberal government has said they are not interested in taking away law-abiding citizens, rifles, hunters, farmers, sharpshooters, sports shooters. That is not the point here at all. The point is to take away assault weapons. AK-47s, AK-15s. Gun crime in Canada is on the rise. In 2017, there were 2,500 more victims of gun violence than in 2013. And many of the incidents involved intimate partners. So too many people have lost their lives to gun violence, and most of them are women. So as somebody who cares a lot about women's issues and violence against women, I believe that it is the right thing to do at this time. Who needs an AK-47? If a hunter needs one, they're not a very good hunter. Thank you.
We're going to respect all owners of firearms, rifles, and whatnot. If you have your PL, we're not going to touch your law-abiding. You're not going to go out and do gang violence. The problem with, as Lenore said, with guns coming across the border, is your AK-47s, your A-15s, and that's due to being smuggled across the border. And the issue to that is tighter border security. It'll be so tight that it's going to squeak if I get elected. There'll be nothing coming across the border that's illegal. Thank you.
Mr. Armstrong.
Well, it might be news to Lenore, but the AK-47 is an automatic machine gun which is already banned in Canada. You cannot use it. The problem with guns in Canada right now is illegal handguns being smuggled across the U.S. border from the United States of America and supplied to street gangs in the cities like Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. You know, guns don't kill people. These are criminals that are bringing them across the border and giving them to kids and selling them to kids. Our party is going to bring in legislation that if you smuggle guns across the border, you're going to jail. If you sell guns that are illegal that come across the border to children in our cities, you're going to jail. We will put a mandatory minimum on anyone that violates that and puts our children at risk. The Liberal Party does not support mandatory minimums. We believe if you commit those type of crimes and smuggle handguns across the border or sell illegal handguns in the cities, you're going to jail. We're going to take a tough approach in this. We're not going to slap them on the wrist like the Liberals do. We're going to get tough with these smugglers that are putting our children at risk.
With respect to the people waiting to ask a question, we'll come back to a question posed by the candidates. This question by Mr. Garvey to all the other candidates. What will your party do to deal with the immigration mess that includes mass migration into the country, inadequate screening, growing backlog, and severe strain on welfare, healthcare, and services? And our first speaker is Mr. Archer.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think Mr. Garvey should also recognize the fact that we are an aging society here, and that in Nova Scotia, right now, there are more people dying than being born. So we need more immigrants. We need immigrants, and we need diversity. This makes us stronger. The immigration and diversity makes us a more successful place with more successful small communities. I've met many of these wonderful immigrants that the communities have welcomed to their shores, and this is the way forward, but doing it in a sustainable and safe fashion. So responsibly growing immigration levels to 350,000 by 2021, and also working with the government of the United States to modernize the Safe Third Country Agreement. But also we have eliminated the massive Harper backlogs by 94%, which kept 21,000 caregivers out of Canada who needed to be here with their families. Thank you.
And because Mr. Garvey was specifically mentioned in that response, he's requested a rebuttal. Mr. Garvey, you have 30 seconds.
There's a lot of myths when it comes to immigration, aging population. The fact is, Canada has the lowest age population, 65 plus, in the G7. We're at 16.9%. Japan is at 26%. Another argument is the economic argument that's false. Most economists say that immigration has an insignificant impact on the economy. Also, most economists say that immigration has an insignificant impact on the aging population. These are facts. Please fact check this.
And Mr. Armstrong.
We need to have a fair and legal and transparent system of immigration which supports the economy of our country. We have a real need for skilled trade workers in this nation. 300,000 truck drivers are needed over the next several years. And when I was working in Ottawa in the Department of Human Resources and Skills Development, we targeted immigration towards those skilled trades and entrepreneurs who are going to hire other people. So we need to base our immigration system on the economic needs of our country. We're not going to set specific targets because we need to do that yearly because our government is able to calculate how many people the economy will bring in without putting us further into debt. Now, we need to base it on economic needs. But the other thing I want to be clear about, I believe that diversity is a strength of this country. Diversity is important and we need to value that. We need to bring the best and brightest into this country from all around the world. And that's why in Nova Scotia in particular, we have to recognize credentials, particularly of foreign doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers. That will help us solve our healthcare crisis in Nova Scotia.
Mr. Duchesne.
We're citizens of the world, and I think Canada can take in a lot more refugees than it does now. The party's talking about clearing up the backlog of people trying to get family members into the country. So that's a good way to proceed, but it's all positive. We need the workers, and diversity is a great thing.
My question is, I know funds are always sparse and we're always trying to figure out, but having done some relief volunteer work overseas, I've noticed the importance of how like 50% of the world population lives on less than $2 a day and all the different issues going on in Myanmar and stuff. So I guess if you're, as you candidates, if you were to come in power, how would you help support to Parliament? What would be your ideas on either immigration and helping people settle in, or helping people with like global aid in other countries? Thank you.
I'm just wondering, we've talked about immigration. Is there somebody here who wants to answer that, helping immigrants in Canada? Well, Mr. Garvey, you'd be the first speaker anyway.
It's an excellent question. I encourage you to look up David Suzuki. He's a couple of years ago, he spoke on this. He called our immigration policy, quote, disgusting. And our conservative friend talked about it. One of the disgusting aspects is the brain drain from these third world countries. So Canada has a policy now at draining out the brightest from these third world countries, which needs those people. We're going to look in 100 years from now at this discrimination and plundering that we're doing in the third world. That's what we would do. We would end that brain drain. Because if you want to help those countries, how can they get ahead when you're taking out the brightest? Think about it. It's disgusting. And David Suzuki's right.
Thank you very much for that question. And again, I know that there are some parties who don't believe in funding people who are starving, and in climate change situations where there are droughts, famine, flooding, they're fleeing from war. And it is my belief that we need to care for our neighbor. We need to care for our global neighbors. And I'm glad to see that the Liberal government also believes in that and is helping to fund international countries where they have major troubles. The other thing is that here in the Atlantic region, one of the biggest issues that we have right now is we don't have enough workers. So we have more jobs than there are workers, and we need people who are trained to come in and take those jobs. And again, this will help us turn it around so that we're not just an aging population, but a growing one. Thank you.
Mr. O'Brien.
We have a robust platform that's going to support Canadians getting ahead. We want average, everyday Canadians to do better. We're going to do a universal tax cut. We're going to take the tax off maternity leave. We're going to take the tax off home eating. And one of the ways we are going to pay for these things is to reduce corporate welfare. But we're also going to reduce the global affairs budget by about 25%. And we're going to cut the funding which goes to countries that are rich and wealthy themselves. Last year, the government of Canada sent global aid to countries like China, North Korea, Iraq, and Iran. We're going to focus on countries that truly need it. And the countries we're going to focus on are, back to what Nora said, are the countries that are suffering, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. Any place where there's conflict and violence, where children are at risk and children have been displaced, we're going to allocate $700 million specifically for those places as part of the remaining 75% of that budget. We believe we need to help other people in the world, but we also have to take care of our own people first. At a time when seniors are struggling, we need to support Canadians as well.
We want to give more, and the NDP is talking about increasing Canada's contribution to 70% of its gross national income, which is significantly more than we're providing now. And we also want to get Canada involved again in international peacekeeping. You know, the Liberals had talked about it, but very little has been done since they came into office.
How will the party you represent and you work to improve the seniors' pharmacare program to include dental care and vision care? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I agree that dental care and eyesight should, and hearing aids should all be wrapped up in health care. It's been clear to me for many years that it's all part of health, your overall health. So the Liberal government is planning on introducing pharmacare so that all people will have their drugs covered and it costs much less as we reach the point where they'll all be covered completely. The other thing we're doing for seniors, which I think is going to be very important for your friend, is making an enhancement, a large enhancement to CPP, also giving seniors $1,000 a year more to boost the GIS top-up, and that's $1,000 a month. Also, increasing the GIS earnings exemption so that low-income seniors who choose to keep on working can actually keep more of their hard-earned dollars. And through the budget 2019, improving all around healthcare and housing as well. Thank you.
The delivery of healthcare is provincial jurisdiction. The federal government's role is to provide funding for that. Our party's position is to increase the amount of money the province gets from the federal government by 3% every year, guaranteed. We've sent a letter to all the health ministers across the country, and that will allow them to have stable funding they can depend on. We'll continue to do that. What they cover and what they don't cover is the responsibility and jurisdiction of the provinces. Each province has to judge the needs of their own population. The needs in Nova Scotia, for example, are far different than the needs in Alberta. So that's why in the Constitution, the provinces control that funding, because it's different across the country. Our party is going to support seniors in many ways. We're going to age the age credit, which will, by $1,000, about a $350 boost to seniors' funds every year. We're also going to take the tax off home heating, which for seniors on fixed income is a huge cost. It's a necessity. You shouldn't have to pay federal tax to heat your home. Those are just a couple of things we're going to do to make life more affordable for seniors.
Mr. Duchesne.
Well, my party's policy program calls for a significant increase in pensions and an expansion of Medicare to include eye care and mental health care and dental care. So those would be helpful to her.
Mr. Gardner. $3.4 billion in equalization payouts in Nova Scotia. This is provincial jurisdiction. They need to be more responsible to the people, the provincial government. So we call on Nova Scotians to hold them accountable. In terms of helping our seniors and dealing with this issue, we got to rein back the foreign outflow. Our conservative friend here, he's either lying or he doesn't understand it. Under Harper, he sprinkled $56.6 billion all over the world. Do your fact check. This is under, go up to the Canadian International Development Agency. All the data is there. You will see the data. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Billions are flowing out of the country. We need to rein that back to help our people.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. That's not the question at all. And
it's related.
It's not related, sir. It is not the question that was asked. I invite Mr. Armstrong to respond with a 30.
I didn't mention his name. Excuse me.
Well, you know what, folks? The election is about 12 days away, and that's the last we're going to see of Stephen Garvey. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
What can each of you do for for students who are going to community college or university?
How to help students, and the first response is from Ms. Zan.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that question. Personally, I believe that all post-secondary education should be free. I've lived in countries where it is free and where young people come out of school and they are not drowning in debt and they're not full of anxiety about how they're going to pay off their tuition. What the Liberal government is proposing to do at this time is to be able to let students go to school and not have to pay back their student loans until at least they have gotten a job and start to make $35,000 a year, or that they have a child that grows to be 5 years old. So this is the beginning. I think that I will, if I get in, start to push towards free post-secondary education, because I think that is the way of the future for our students. Thank you.
Well, listen, thank you very much for the question. As a father of 3 children who have recently finished university, I know the financial stress it puts on not only the students but the entire family for many years following, and we need to take a bigger federal role in supporting students. A couple of things we're going to do to help students is I support the loan forgiveness program, the low interest rates that the federal government puts towards the federal part of the student loan. But one of the biggest challenges for young people today is the ability to purchase a first home and start building up credit and building up the ability to settle the roots down, put the roots down, and actually raise a family. We're going to reduce the mortgage stress test. We're also going to amortize the new mortgage rate over 30 years, not 25 years for first-time homeowners. That's going to help literally hundreds of thousands of young people across this country buy their first home and start their lives. We need to support the youth in this country starting those lives so that they can begin to have children, because we do need more people in Canada.
Mr. Duchesne.
You know, we need more people, but immigration does that too. We would immediately take the interest off student loans and move toward a grant formula, where the grants would, of course, not have to be repaid. And in the reasonably near future, we want all post-secondary education to be part of the public school system and no charge.
Canadian students are coming second. There's 454,000 foreign student permit holders this year entering Canada, foreign student permit holders. There's 98 universities across our country. If you go into them today, they're full of foreign students. Our students are coming second. We're going to rein this back in and make sure we put our students first.
Marika Marco, thank you for the question. There you are. I couldn't find you. Green Party policy is to make tuition free for universities and community colleges. When you look at the things that the Green Party is going to do for free, it's quite amazing. We're going to have free tuition, we're going to have pharmacare, we're going to have a guaranteed income. And amazingly, the Green Party submitted our budget back in June to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer said the numbers check out. If we cut the subsidies to oil and gas companies, if we stop the way we're spending and redirect the money, as is outlined in the Green Party platform, we can afford to do all of these things, really take care of our people, and heal our environment. Thank you for the question.
And I've heard a lot of your questions and answers. And it must be hard for all of us down here to understand what the real answer, the real truth is. It's obvious to me that a few of you don't know you don't know. Some of you know you don't know, and you're finding the answers, which I applaud. My question to you is this. I mean, there's so many questions about refugees and immigrants and so on. That was going to be my question, but I'm going to change it to the Aboriginals. I was up there for a good number of years working with a school in that area. And,
if I may, sir, just come to a question, please.
Please, yeah, okay. So anyway, the Aboriginal peoples do not have clean water. A lot of them don't even have bathrooms to go to. And my question to you is this. Money in itself to individuals in the far north actually creates problems. What is your party platform going to do to help solve some of these issues in the far north, which is our third world, by the way? Thank you very much.
Well, Thank you for your question, Mr. Chapman. Like you, I worked up north in a First Nations teaching environment when I started my career. I also was the first principal of Truro Elementary School, which has the entire student population, elementary population from the Millbrook Reserve. We have a great example just outside Truro in the Millbrook Reserve of a very successful First Nations community. There was a very bright chief there many years ago named Lawrence Ball, a friend of mine. He made two priorities for that reserve: economic development and education. And when you look at where that reserve is today with their new leadership, they've done a wonderful job. Last year, a 92% graduation rate in that community, higher than the average population in the area. If you have supports for economic development and strong supports for First Nation students in school, you will see great results. Now, one of the things we have to do is support in the north natural resource development, getting our oil and gas to tidewater, supporting our gold mines, supporting our diamond mines, because those jobs are close to those First Nations communities that are most at risk, and that will change everything if we get behind them and support that.
And Mr. Duchesne.
Well, I'm not sure the answer is to use the native lands as job creation opportunities for mining companies and forest companies. But we do need to put more money into the north. Education and healthcare in the north have historically been shortchanged, and maybe we need some kind of extra above what at the average to help them to catch up. There's certainly real challenges in the north in terms of education. It's hard to get teachers to come. It's hard to get teachers to stay. The regions are remote, but we need to try to address it, and we need to put more money into it to help it succeed.
And Mr. Garvey.
Yeah, I disagree with the Conservative candidate. I think the most important approach is self-help. What these mainstream parties do is they give a lot of talk during an election and then they hand out the welfare. I challenge anyone to go to these reserves and talk to them, and they will tell you that. This is a third world, Canada's third world. There's not clean drinking water, there's not proper sewage, they're living in dilapidated homes, a lot of the reserves. We got to do better. We got to rein back the foreign outflow that our Conservative friend was talking about sprinkling in Africa and put it to our First Nations. Thank you.
Final response from Ms. Zan.
Well, thank you very much for this question. I think that Indigenous issues are so important to Canada, and I think it's about time that we started to address them properly and with respect and dignity. I've been the Aboriginal Indigenous Affairs critic in the provincial government for the last 6 years, and I've done a lot of work with our First Nations people here in Nova Scotia, protecting the land and the water from various different polluters, big polluters. So one of the things I did was I introduced a bill called an environmental act, an environmental act to address environmental racism. I think that racism is at the bottom of a lot of the problems here.